Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello, and welcome back to Small Talk, Wallula's weekly podcast. My name is Zach Bolin, student pastor here at Wallula Christian Church. I'm joined by Craig Archer, worship pastor, and Lance Kaufman, lead pastor. We're glad that you're with us today. Today we're going to be looking at Acts 27. We are so close to the end. We have one more week, Acts chapter 28, before we end the book of Acts. And so today we're going to be looking at Paul and the shipwreck as he was traveling to Rome. And going through that. If you're watching us on YouTube, you may notice there's a bit of a theme going on. We have our purple Wallula shirts. So if you're watching us, then you get an extra special treat. This was just an accident, though, correct? For you two?
Who's to say?
Who's to say? Shout out to Zoe. Yeah, so I came in not dressed like this, and they both were wanting to represent Wallula. I had not even thought about that, and so I went into Lori's office, where she's the keeper of all things Wallula shirts, and she happened to have one extra for me, so I threw one on, and so.
See, the truth is, Craig and I talk daily about.
I do feel left out.
How can we match?
Yeah,
and it's just that he's way cooler than me.
Yes,
and so we don't have many matches.
Yeah, there's not. I actually thought about that. Yes.
Yeah,
Craig does dress better than both of us.
Yeah.
So if it is going to overlap, he has to lower his standards a little bit to line up with what.
I don't even know how. I mean, I would just wear like jeans and shirts.
You don't wear those kind of shirts normally. Yeah. Shirts with
You're just more handsome than us.
Yeah,
so
they're usually solid color shirts.
You just look better than us.
We should just go through the YouTube channel and start scrolling our
little screenshots.
Yeah, the screenshots of this, and you'll just be able to see
just judge ourselves.
Yeah, like a hoodie. You don't normally wear hoodies. Just a casual hoodie's like a t-shirt for the winter time. That was my deep thought there.
It's like a t-shirt for the winter.
It's just something you throw on. It's like, oh, no big deal. Like a button-up shirt to work is something you would wear.
Right.
And that is not something I would wear unless it's open already and just sort of thrown over as a coat for the fall. So
sort of screams you have a meeting.
Yeah.
You know, I've got an important appointment.
Yes, if
Put
you
a collar
wear
on.
If you're wearing something buttoned up, it's like Lance is leaving sometime today.
Something's happening.
Something is going on. There's other pastors he's meeting with.
Yeah, which is sort of terrible. But, so we better move quickly.
Okay, all right.
Glimpse behind the curtain there.
My first full-time ministry, I was in Yuma, Arizona, and I walked in, and the onboarding process, and so. And you guys have been onboarded, and so you know how I've learned to onboard people. And so, however bad you thought that was sort of the process I learned in. So show up, and he's like, I'm meeting with the senior pastor, and we get to dress code in the office, and it was kind of khakis and polo,
like on
that kind of. I don't know how you describe that.
Not Sunday morning, like
business casual, business casual, right, kind of thing. But yeah, like slacks but he said, "Well, that's the dress code, but you're the youth pastor."
Loopholes.
Yeah,
but you're the
nobody.
Youth pastor.
It doesn't count as much.
Yeah. So it was sort of like whatever. You might have to go hang with students and So
no one wants to see khakis as you're hanging out with students.
He died. By the way, this is sad. That's sad.
Oh, yeah.
He died very shortly after I started, and the dress code
just plummeted.
It was just hanging on by a thread.
It's obvious who was setting the tone.
When the new guy came, the staff was like, "Here's the dress code, just so you know. This is how it's going to be."
Well, now that you mention it, I remember when we met to go over the handbook for our onboarding or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And
was he like, "This is a hard rule"?
Well, so when we did, there is a dress code section.
Is it really?
And we got there, and all you said was,
"Quit acting like you don't know the handbook."
I know there's a handbook. I know there's a handbook. I didn't know there's a dress code section.
But I remember this part specifically. When we got to the dress code, all you said was, "Make sure you wear clothes." And here we are.
And here we are, nailing it every day.
Yeah. See, you've exceeded the standard,
There you
Craig.
go.
That's what we're saying.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, there you go. So we're all matching. Maybe who knows what will happen again.
Mm-hmm.
But
It took us how many episodes for this to happen?
how many episodes? It's like 100 something, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure, over 100.
Did we mark it with did we do anything for the 100th or just a
I
year?
thought we had a cake.
Was the cake for the 100th or a year anniversary?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd have to look and see how many total
It
we
was
have.
very meaningful to us.
We
I
had
don't
cake,
even
right?
know what the cake was for.
I know. We had cake, and
Poor
I'm like,
Katie.
did we
I
eat
think
that
Katie
cake?
made that cake.
Yeah.
Katie.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Thanks, Katie.
I thought it was the Revelation. Didn't it have a dragon on it or something?
Oh, we did do that.
Yeah.
Was it just for ending Revelation?
I don't know. We like cake. We might have had more than one cake. We don't
Well,
remember.
you know what? That's a good tie-in to our opening question because speaking of food and dessert, we always start with sort of a fun question, and today's goes like this: If you invented an ice cream flavor, what ingredients would you have, and what would it be called? So not cake, but ice cream, which goes with it. Yeah. So just more of a creative question here. What would be your favorite ice cream flavor, or not favorite, but just if you're inventing a new one? What would you do, Craig? You're the ice cream guy, so
I am.
This was
the ice
inspired
cream.
by Craig.
Was it?
Because I saw online he's been making ice cream.
Yeah, you
have.
actually.
Yeah.
Am I? Yeah, of course. Like when you got ordained, you wanted ice cream for
Yeah.
it, and then
Yeah. So I've been experimenting, and I'm only 2 batches in, so I'm not that far into my experimentation.
Right.
But if I were to just, I put myself in the shoes of an ice cream shop owner, and I was like, what would be my signature thing?
Right.
And I love cookies and cream, so like anything with Oreos in it.
Sure.
That's what I gravitate towards. But and I also like cookie dough ice cream. So I would just add in all my favorite cookies, mix it up,
Right.
and call it Craig's Cookie Concoction.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
And you can't go wrong because it's ice cream with just a bunch of cookies loaded into it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
So cookie dough and Oreo. That's what we have so far.
yeah, I mean, I don't know about all of them.
Oh, okay.
I didn't think through the list. Like,
Of all the cookies.
Yeah, because
Peanut
I think
butter.
you can actually go to Dairy Queen right now and get like a Oreo cookie dough ice cream.
oh, can you?
I mean, ice cream Blizzard. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, you can do
But
whatever,
you
you can
can't
do
get
whatever you want.
Craig's cookie concoction.
No,
Right.
no, if you do that,
Right.
they'll have to.
I like snickerdoodles. Put some of those in there.
Yeah,
okay.
see that?
That'd be pretty good.
Right.
Peanut butter cookies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Get a little of that in there.
That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
I came up with a lot, and so I'm only going to give you one. I was like, I tried to brainstorm just different things I like, but the one I thought texture-wise probably, it's not that this is my favorite candy, but a Rice Krispie treat ice cream. So like the crunch
Sure.
of the Rice Krispies, but then also with marshmallow, some
Yeah.
kind of thing in it. Yeah, I just thought.
Sure.
And if I'm having to invent it and put it, it's just easy to get those ingredients. If you're like, make it, I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And that'll be easy. But yeah, so I just thought some sort of Rice Krispie treat would be kind of fun, like just a different crunch in it.
Never had that.
I know. I'm trying to think of something that was not. That was
Do
new.
you have a name?
Oh yeah. Come back to me. I'll think of. Let me think of something.
Gotta think of a name.
Yeah, the pressure's on. I didn't write that out.
Yeah. That's
I
all
got it.
right.
All right. What about you?
Well, I started with. So I have very few bad ice cream experiences to draw from, right?
Yeah.
But I like the they're I think like Little Debbie peanut butter bars.
Oh yeah, kind of crunchy.
Yeah, what Nutter bars?
Nut-
or
Nutty bars?
Nutty bars.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah.
And they several years ago they came out with Little Debbie ice cream with those different snack cakes mixed in or whatever.
Oh.
I've seen
Or
that.
it's
in the
supposed to be
store.
that. Yeah, so I was pretty excited, and it was pretty not good.
Yeah.
It was not great.
Yeah.
And but so that got me thinking. Oh, I kind of like that stuff, and I thought, well, you remember Grandma always had the weird kind of assortment of candies or whatever you think about as Grandma
those
candies.
hard candies?
Well, hard candies,
Okay.
and so I thought you could have a butterscotch ice cream.
Okay.
All right. With this grandma candy that reminds me of those peanut butter bars. They're kind of hard, but you chew them. They're peanut butter.
Oh, I know
bars.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what. They're just in that mix of grandma candy, and it's so hard. You could bust those up, and you could just call it like, grandma's purse.
Oh, that's so creative.
Yeah.
Oh, now I don't even know. I was gonna be like Rice Krispie treat.
My
ice
grandma
cream.
always had like the hard candy root beer flavor.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I imagine that being in there.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
The peanut butter bar is the stick, isn't it? Some sort of stick.
It's kind of like a sesame stick, but it's
I
it's
know
like
what you're
it's
talking
like
about,
it's
but
like
I don't
orange.
know what
It
you would
reminds
call
me
that.
of the inside of a Butterfinger.
yes, very much.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
it'd be like
it has the texture
yeah.
of it,
Yeah.
and
yeah, it'd be like that.
Bosco's. No, not Bosco. Bosco sticks is what they eat at. Is what Saley eats in elementary school for lunch.
I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Just
My
cheese.
grandpa always had Chico sticks.
Chico's. Yeah, that's
Or
what I'm
Chico.
thinking of. Yeah, isn't that it?
Those are like coconut and peanut butter.
Never. Oh, okay. That's
And
what I was thinking of.
He
for-
always had those, and I was like,
I've never
no, thank
heard
you.
of that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, I remember that.
I saw him in Dollar General the other day.
really?
Didn't buy one.
No.
Mm. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
ice
Do you have-
cream.
so you have a name?
No. Marshmallow crispy explosion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That sounds like something you buy at Dairy Queen.
I know it does. Yeah. Duh, but Grandma's purse. That's really good. I like that.
I don't know if that sounds all that good, but
No, it doesn't. But it does sound creative. So
yeah.
I thought that was a good description.
yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, great answers. Well, moving on, we are looking at a couple of questions here from Acts chapter 27 in the small group questions. And the first one is from number 5. Actually, it's quite a few questions, but I'm just going to sort of stick to the first one. It says, what role or priority should counsel from godly men and women play in our decision making? So when making decisions, what role should other believers, mentors or just godly mentors, however you want to look at it, what role should that play? That's sort of the main question. And then a couple of follow-ups is like, why do we sometimes not follow that
Right.
godly advice? And then also, how does that sort of format look when we're interacting with God?
Right.
Does the way we approach godly mentors also mirror that with God? And what could we learn from it? So a lot of different ways to go with it, but godly advice when making big decisions.
Right.
What role? Anyway, I could keep repeating this, but I'm going to stop talking. Craig, what did you have? What did you have for that one?
Well, I thought first was, well, you're seeking wisdom. So I thought there's got to be something in Proverbs
There you go.
about
Oh, yeah.
this. So
Sure.
I went and searched it, found it. Proverbs 15:22 says, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed.
Yeah.
And then there's another one in Proverbs 11, verse 14. Says, for lack of guidance, a nation falls, but many advisors make victory sure. And the Hebrew word for guidance there, I don't remember how to say it or even what it looked like, but it was kind of the same sort of description of
Probably
like,
some kind of squiggly lines.
yes, and I just
Stuff.
breezed over it, and I
Yeah,
thought,
yeah.
I'm not going to try.
That's what it looked like.
It's talked about like, it's related to driving a ship or steering a ship, and if you don't do that, the ship's going to crash. And I thought, how appropriate for
Right.
this chapter we're
There
in.
you go.
But obviously, Proverbs, wisdom literature, there's some truth to that. And thinking about the question, I thought like this, the other part of like, why do we not do this? And I thought of this poem. I don't know when it was written or who it wrote it, but the end of the poem says, I wrote it down, I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of people's approach to life, to like working out problems or issues or making decisions.
Yeah.
Is we kind of just keep our head down and we want to do what we think's best and keep moving forward and deal with whatever repercussions or what might happen.
Right.
And because part of asking for help and advice and wisdom from other people is whether you acknowledge it or not, you're acknowledging that, hey, I need help.
Right.
Yeah.
And people,
There's like a vulnerability.
yes, yeah. We don't like to do that. Maybe not naturally too. We just don't go that way.
Right.
And I remember when after I graduated college, I was teaching, and while I was finishing up college and teaching, I had experiences doing some internships in the church, and then I felt like I think I should be pursuing ministry. And it was like this weird thing, like I just got this degree and using it for this teaching job. And so I remember seeking wisdom from other people because I thought, well, this is a huge decision, and I want to make sure that this is good and what I'm doing is wise. And I remember some of those specific conversations and people speaking into my life and really helping me walk through things and make those decisions. And looking back, I'm like, man, I would have really struggled to try to do that on my own and figure this stuff out. And so, yeah, it's a great resource that we have as the church to find people that are have more experience, which leads to more wisdom in life and being able to speak into where you're at. Like being in different small groups, like the age range in our group. I don't know what the number would be, but like I know 2 weeks ago when you were gone. Clark was just really encouraging like all the young dads, like keep doing what you're doing, because from his experience he can look back and he's speaking from victories and failures and all these things, and so he's able to do that, and it's just really great for our group. So this is just a huge resource that we can tap into as the church, and to really embrace it and not just try to do our own thing.
I think immediately I thought of Proverbs 15:22. So plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. It's the one. So I didn't really flesh it out anymore. I just thought that's immediately. The question is, what role or priority should this play? Should godly men and women play in our decision making? And it's a huge one. It is one of the main things that you should be going to when you're going to Scripture, going to prayer, and then also going to other believers. I think is just foundational for living a successful Christian life, because you don't have to do this all on your own. Like we talk about how we're created for community, and this is part of it. And so, it's funny because working with students, sometimes the questions are like, well, why doesn't God just tell us? Or why, I wish I just knew. And a lot of times it's like, it's in the Bible. You just got to find it. But then sometimes it's like, it's kind of in there, but it does take some guidance and leadership. And so just having people that you trust, that you look up to, that you see the fruit in their life, and you're like, okay, how do I get that? And then just asking them, what do you think is invaluable? And so, I mean, I was trying to think of like, why do people not do this? And I'm thinking of some specific people, maybe just one, but like one where they met with a bunch of us, some people on staff and some people outside of the staff, and was like, what should I do? And everyone, I remember I was one of the last ones this person talked to. I was like, I think you should do this. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, what did everyone else say that also was from the church? And he said, oh, they agreed with you. And I was like, well, it seems like there's a pattern here. And then this person didn't do it. And, a few years later it all kind of fell down around him. But the point is, like, he had the answer. So why did he not? Especially when everyone was consistent. And I think, because you had said like, oh, there's a vulnerability, right? I want to do it myself. And I was kind of thinking of it from the other side. Why would someone reject it if it's obvious? Because it's not always super hard. It's sometimes very, very basic. Sometimes you just, you want your own answer. Right. I want it to back up what I've already made my answer. I just want someone else to validate it. And if the godly counsel's like, that's not the good one, then you would probably want to reject it. And so I put like, maybe pride or selfishness, or just maybe it's, you're just being misled. Like the counsel that you're getting is not really godly. You may be settling for, people who aren't really, maybe, your friends. Anyway, so whatever the case, so why do people not take it? It could be for a number of different reasons, but, ultimately, like how do you get around, how do I say this? How do you make sure that you don't fall into that, like asking people that aren't really following God? And one of the things I thought was, kind of an age thing. Are they older, and have I seen fruit in their lives? Like they're consistently following God, and I've seen that. And if that's the case, then I want to ask them. And so like, how does this apply to God? And I just put like, there's going to be times when I feel like, hey, Scripture says this is what God wants me to do, that I may not want to. It may be really difficult, and my selfishness doesn't want to. But if I am convinced that I've searched, I've researched, I've talked to other people, this is the way that seems to be the right answer, then I should do that no matter what. And that's sort of the thing. Like if I'm getting advice from others and all roads point to this one way, then I should follow that. And same, even more so with God, getting rid of my pride, being vulnerable. I think all of that has to do with, putting God first and myself second. But yeah, what about you, Lance?
Yeah, I think the first part of this question, you guys have nailed it, and it's a no-brainer, really, that for sure we ought to seek the advice of others, and godly counsel is beneficial, and so we should ask others and seek that advice. And I'm reminded of the story, from Acts 27, and when Paul speaks up the first time, hey, I think we ought to stay here in Fair Havens and not go to the next place, and he's speaking from sort of past personal experience. I think I don't think it's like a word from God or whatever. It's not prophecy necessarily. Maybe some of that's intermingled or whatever, but I just think it was personal experience, and so just kind of, I don't know how you describe that. I don't know how you separate godly Christian wisdom from secular wisdom or whatever, but that's sort of the deal, right? I mean, he's just lived through that. And I just think about really easy, simple things in life that maybe aren't easy or simple to us, individuals or whatever. How great is it that there's folks around us in the church that, when I have a car issue, I can, well, yeah, I'm going to take it to the mechanic, but when the mechanic says this is what's wrong, I can call somebody and say, "What do you think about this?" Like, right?
Just to make sure.
Yeah, is this really the deal? and because you trust that person, and they can give you, yeah, that's about right, or whatever. And with so many things, that I can make a list of things that have gone on in our home, like home repairs, and it's like, what do I do?
Right.
And how do I go? So from really basic kind of just living life kind of things that you can get advice and counsel from, and then the really big decisions in life, for sure we ought to seek godly counsel. And I was pointed to a story, an Old Testament story, when Solomon died, and so his son is taking his place, and Rehoboam is his son, and Solomon had really been taxing and working the people a lot, building the temple, and there's just a heavy burden to do that, and so when Rehoboam takes the throne, it's his brother and some of the other leaders come to him and say, maybe ease off. You ought to ease off. He said, well, give me a few days and come back, and I'll give you my answer. And Rehoboam goes to the elder statesman in Israel, and he asks, what do you think about this request? And the elder statesman said, essentially they say, look, if you do this, if you serve the people, if you kind of back off some of the taxes and the workload, if you serve the people, they'll serve you forever, kind of idea. You'll win them over. And he went away from that, and Scripture says he rejected the counsel of the older men, right? It's like what you were saying, Zach. He kind of already had his mind made up, and he was seeking godly counsel. Well, he was seeking the counsel he wanted, not necessarily the godly counsel. And so when that wasn't the advice he wanted, he went to some of the younger advisors on his staff, kind of the younger officials, and he said, what do you think about this? And their response was, their response was something like, you tell the people that, that my father's finger is the size of my wrist, right? That I can come down way heavier than this, and just abuse them a little bit more and get some more out of them. Yeah. And he's like, that sounds like a good idea.
That's what I
want to do.
More out of them.
Yeah. Let's get some more. And so he just follows the advice and of the folks that he wanted to listen to. And I think there's some principles there that we ought to remember. Is first, don't make your mind up, right? Seek, and secondly, have a a variety of counselors. You know, if all of the people you're seeking advice from look just like you, and there's value there that we ought not ignore.
Yeah.
They're in the same season of life. They're experiencing some of the same things. They're going through the same struggles and all of those things. But you guys mentioned it. Man, there's real value in seeking, counsel from somebody a little more mature, a little ahead of the game. This is what happened when I did that.
Yeah. I found out even from people who haven't succeeded, like in their failures, they're older and they'll say, "Hey, I did this and it didn't." Like if Rehoboam could say, at the end of his life, and they're like, "How should I govern?" He'd say the same thing, like, ease off because I tried it the other way. Like even in someone's failure, they could still give wisdom. And
I remember one time, and it was just came up in conversation naturally. I was talking to Dave Coleman one time, and he was talking about kind of in my stage of life, and he said, he was trying to pursue God and then chase after like money and like working up his career ladder and stuff, and he's like, that was stupid. And just even like hearing that, I wasn't seeking that at the time, but he was really like speaking into my life, and it just did a lot for me hearing that from him. And like you said, he was just ahead of me and had some experience.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of that, this doesn't quite connect, but it does, I think, especially in number 11. It says, how do we go from bemoaning our circumstances to rejoicing in them? So when you're going through hard times, maybe you do reach out to for wisdom and guidance. But in general, taking a step back, when you're going through really difficult situations in whatever it is, in this case it was a shipwreck. But how do we go from bemoaning, going through difficult times, to rejoicing and having joy in difficult times? What'd you have, Craig?
This is such a good question, and I love thinking about this question. I mean, we've been following Paul for a long time, and he's a great example of what that looks like, because all the stuff that he's been through, and I thought of just a couple of the times in his letters where I've always feel challenged by that, like in Philippians, like to live is Christ, to die is gain. So he's, whatever happens, like he's good because he remembers the promises of Jesus. Again, in Philippians, he says, rejoice in the Lord always. And throughout the Bible, there's other times, like I thought of Psalm 16, in your presence there is fullness of joy. And so what I was kind of thinking about was the difference of circumstances and how those change. There's an up and down with circumstances.
Right. They're
kind of constant, ebb and flow. But then you get on the other side, the consistency of God and his promises. And I know at one point, a few years ago, I was probably going through some circumstance that, I was bumming about. And I really had to just remind myself, like, I'm not promised a whole lot of things. I know for me, like, things that will get to me, a certain circumstance, is like if we have issues with a vehicle, and it's either going to be out of commission for a little bit or cost a decent chunk of money or something, and I'll just get like super down about it and just be like, I can't believe this is happening. And then I have to just remind myself, well, I was never promised, when I bought this used van from the used car lot, this van isn't going to work forever. They didn't promise me that's going to last 20 years. And so just things like that. I have to remember those things that aren't promises, but then latch onto the things that are promises. And I think that's what Paul does throughout his life. And it's crazy to think about the 180 that happened in his life, where he says he's full of zeal, but it was like kind of this anger and hatred, and that was driving his decisions and what he was doing. And then you get on the other side where he has a moment where he meets Jesus and totally flips his mission in life, and the promise of eternal life is given to him because of Jesus. And then it's like, look at him now. And he's put in prison. He's beaten to the point that they think he's dead. he's getting shipwrecked. All these things happen, and he's like, well, I still got Jesus. And he's holding on to that promise over and over and over again. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I approach that question, is there's two sides.
Right.
And the consistent change, and there's nothing to latch onto. So what are we going to latch onto? It's the hope that we have in Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about this question about like how can we rejoice even when it's difficult, it's one of, like you said, it's a really good question. Yeah, it's one of the most basic questions that Christians will ask, because everyone goes through hard times, whether it's done to them or something that you do to yourself. Like, we live in a sinful world, so there's not one person. Matter of fact, the strongest Christians I know most of the time have been through some really hard things, and come out the other side. And that's kind of one of the things I was thinking about, is that why would you be happy or glad or whatever? And the Bible talks about it, but that God can and will use your time of suffering, and you can come out better for it. It's still not pleasant, but I kind of joke with the students, like, anytime we go through something difficult on a trip, like anything bad happens, flat tire or whatever, I always joke and say, well, it looks like you have a story to tell. Like, when you get back home, like right now this is not fun, but later on you're going to laugh about this, or you're going to look back at this, and it's these kind of like hard times that kind of make for good stories. So that's a kind of a shallow way to look at it, but a little deeper. When I go through hard times, like the growth most of the growth that I've ever had, either personally or spiritually, has come because of a difficult situation. And so I can rejoice in the fact that God can still redeem this, and probably will if I stay with him. I have seen, like I said, God move in my own life, and also the church move more when there's difficult times going on. And so God can use those situations. The other one is, you kind of hit on it as well. I worded it differently, but when you said, like, I'm not owed anything, I put that in order for me to have joy or to be rejoicing, I have to release my expectations of what the outcome should be. The idea of, like, I'll be happy if God blank. Right. If he comes to, well, then I'll be happy. And I'm reminded of in Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in chapter 3, when they're talking to Nebuchadnezzar. And it said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Right. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. And it's like, God can totally save us from your fire, but if he doesn't, we're still not going to serve. And so this idea of, like, I'll only serve God if he saves me from this fire. And they're like, no. We'll serve him no matter what. Like, he totally can. And if he doesn't, that's okay. Yeah. And so having that outcome, and I think the biggest picture is that because even if things don't turn out well, we are still protected. Ultimately, live as Christ is to die, and to die as gain. That Paul said. That even if the worst thing happens, then we go to heaven. Even if death comes, then we go to heaven. So if we're going through hard times, God can redeem it. If all things seem hopeless, like, we could still see hope in it because of what can happen. If the worst thing happens, man, we get to be with God. Things will be restored. And so it's a hard thing. I'm saying this like it's super easy. Like, it is really hard.
That's how I felt answering it too.
Yeah, when you're going through, I mean, I don't, if people are listening, like, I'm saying it like it's academic, because this is, but I'm, when you're going through it, you really have to hold on. But then when you come out, you're like, man, I'm stronger for having held on. Yeah. And so,
like, the Psalms of Lament are a real thing, right? And people crying out and hurt and pain. And even in our story, like, verse 20, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Right? There, Luke didn't say, well, half of us felt this way, or 3/4 of us felt this way, or even everybody but the hero Paul felt this way. Everybody felt that way. Yeah. And it's the so how do you get from point A to point B? And I think first you just acknowledge, man, this is it. It's not an easy trip.
Right.
It's not simple, and nobody is perfect at it. Nobody's perfect at it. I think of folks who, I don't know, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, like Christina Hutchison, who has dealt with a long cancer journey. Yeah. And man, every time I talk to that woman, she is upbeat and positive and looking forward to tomorrow and just ready to go.
Totally.
And that's not every day, even for her. I just know that's not every day. That's not every moment. Yeah. That there's times when it's like, well, I haven't seen the sun or the stars for a few days, and this is pretty rough. And so, how do we get from point A to point B? And I think there's a few things that we have to do, right? And in Acts chapter 27, Paul finds himself in these circumstances sort of outside of his control kind of thing. But for real, one of the things we have to ask, there's no bigger thief, there's no bigger destroyer of joy than our own sin. Right? And so we have to consider, what role have I played in this? And sometimes it's going to be zero. And sometimes it's going to be, maybe, these things that I've been doing in my life, or decisions that I've made, or places I have gone, or relationships that I've thrown away or built are contributing to this situation. And we've got to come to terms with that. Martin Luther said, sin is pure unhappiness, forgiveness is pure happiness. Right? And so that state of grace is where we can find joy. And then I just came down with this idea of worry, and what, I tried to think, what's really worry? Well, when I'm worried or anxious about something, what's that state of being? And I just think it's he goes back to that conversation we just had about pride kind of getting in the way sometimes of listening to godly counsel. And it's sort of pride. It's the inability to control the situation. For me anyway, so much of the time I get worried when I can't fix it, when I can't control it, when maybe something even as simple as a car breaking down. Well, I can't control that. And so I get anxious about it, and I worry about it. And so I read this article, and I'm reluctant to talk about it because I think it's going to be in a message soon. But and I'll get the facts wrong right now because anyway, and I'll try to get them right later. But it's talked about parenting and in the 21st century or whatever, and that you've heard terms and descriptions like helicopter parenting and kind of staying real close and all that, and it's gone sort of by that to the wording I'm going to mess up, but it's the idea of like divine protector. That parents feel like they're in this position of having to know every single thing and every place and every step that your kid makes, so that they won't be hurt in any way, shape or form. And it does a couple things. First, that's not good for the kid, right? It's not good parenting, but but secondly, can you imagine the state of anxiety that you would be in? Pretending that you could control every situation and every conversation and every moment of anybody's life. That's just not who we are. We can't do that.
It's too much.
And so the article is all about the rising rate of stress and anxiety in parents today. And if you are trying to control everything, you can't, and you're not going to. And the only way to do that, I think, is to get past that is, well, Paul gives us the example here. And again, this is going to seem like a really simple answer to it, right? But it is worship. Because when you think about it, when you are worshiping God, what are you doing? You're acknowledging that there is one true, there's one big God, and that you're not him, that you fall short of that glory, and you need his grace and forgiveness and help. And so worship, in whatever way that happens here. Paul breaks bread and he prays before the meal. That worship, kind of putting yourself in the position of seeking God, and that that's how we can make it through that, from worry to joy. And it's kind of, we just had a baptism this last Sunday, and baptism is sort of a really beautiful picture of that, isn't it? Of when you think about it, being immersed underwater, you are giving yourself over,
yeah,
right, physically in the moment, to the person baptizing you, and in a much bigger way, you're giving yourself over to the lordship of Jesus, and you're submitting to that. And it's an act of worship in and of itself that places you in kind of that position of servant to him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Man, there's like 4 things in that I wanted to say. That was really good. Especially the parenting part and, wanting to take control. But I think ultimately, like you said, the giving control over to God in all things also means, like, if things don't go my way or if I'm struggling, we still are admitting God is sovereign. By turning that, not to say like it's always perfect. And I think when Christians act like everything's fine when it's not, that also is disingenuous. Yeah. And we're not trying to say that, but
well, you see that in Acts 27 too, right? When Paul says, God's going to rescue us.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to wreck.
Right, yeah.
Right? Yeah, eat this bread because you're going to have to swim.
Yeah.
You're going to have to hold on to that piece of the ship.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
This is not easy.
As a parent saying, like, or with the youth group or whatever, but telling someone when they're going through something really, really hard, you're going to be okay.
Right.
And having that confidence of saying, yes, this is bad. You'll be fine. You're going through a breakup. You're going through whatever. It's like, God could still use this. You'll be fine. Just don't give up, and it will be better. It's hard for someone who's in the middle of it to be like, I don't feel like this. And you're like, then you're right on track, because that's exactly where it's going to happen. So all right. Well, very cool. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Next week we should close out and get another cake. We'll let Katie know.
Something.
We can have to end up for Acts 28. Get another.
Zach will be letting. I'm not doing any of that.
Get one of the ship on it or some snakes. Either way, come and check it out next week. We're glad that you're with us. We'll see you next week.